Hey everybody, welcome to chapter 26. So this is the second chapter in the urinary system. And in this chapter we're going to be looking at fluid balance as well as electrolyte balance. So our fluids are constantly changing in our body depending on our activity levels and what we are taking in throughout the day. Electrolytes are also constantly changing depending on what we're taking in, but they have to be regulated. Both fluid and electrolyte balance has to be maintained. If they aren't, then different diseases can occur. And so when we look at our fluid, by body weight, we are composed of approximately 65% water or fluid. And this amount is going to be dependent on our age. So infants have a higher percentage of fluid and elderly have the least amount of fluid. It also depends on our composition. So adipose tissue has less fluid, skeletal muscle has more fluid. So if you have a lot of adipose tissue on you, you're going to get dehydrated a lot more easily than if you have a lot of muscle on you. The water content varies also by organ. So different organs are going to have a higher percentage of fluid than others. And the big example here is that the brain consists of approximately 85% fluid, whereas our teeth only have about 8 to 10% fluid and bones only have about 20 to 25% fluid. So I mean, different organs have different amounts of fluid as well. So what are the types of fluids that we find in our body? I say water, but I shouldn't say just water, even though water does make up the majority of the fluid. When we talk about fluid, there's intracellular fluid, which accounts for the fluid that's found within our body cells. And so it's inside the plasma membrane of our cells. And then we have extracellular fluid, which is either going to be interstitial fluid, so it's fluid between the cells, or intravascular fluid, which is the fluid that surrounds our blood. So that would be that plasma, okay? So intracellular fluid makes up the majority of the fluid in our body. It's inside of our cells. And then we have interstitial fluid, which makes up a large proportion of the extracellular fluid. And then we have the plasma or intravascular fluid that makes up the rest of that fluid, other than a very small portion, which is going to include things like the fluid that is found within our eyes, so like the aqueous humor, vitreous humor. So fluid that typically doesn't enter into exchange. And this is just a graph showing the different fluids. So if you're looking at the intracellular fluid is this peach color. Then you have the interstitial fluid, which is this light blue, and the plasma, which is red. And down here it shows the concentration of ions within each of those fluids. So if you look inside of our cells, we have very little sodium ions, but in blood plasma and in the interstitial fluid, we have a lot of sodium ions. And you can look at for chlorine or bicarbonate or any of them. Fluid movement then occurs between compartments. So you're always having fluid move from the cells to the plasma or from the plasma to the cells. And this is going to be dependent on the amount of solutes and the amount of water in each of those environments. So water moves via osmosis, solutes move via diffusion. And so if you're looking at the blood plasma, on the arterial end, we always have a higher amount of water and a lower amount of ions on this side, and we have more on this side, more ions and less of the fluid. So fluid leaves here and it's reabsorbed here, and materials will move with the fluid out or back in. And so fluid balance exists when the amount of fluid that is taken in is equal to the amount of fluid that we release. We also want to make sure that we have normal distribution of water in our body. So the amount of fluid that we take in is going to be approximately, and this is on average, about 2,500 milliliters of fluid daily. So some of that water comes from, or I'll say the majority of the water comes from the foods and the drinks that we have. A small portion of that water comes from metabolic reactions within our body. So when we have a dehydration synthesis reaction, that's going to actually produce water as a byproduct. When you build something up, you produce water as a byproduct. And when we are producing energy, water is another byproduct. And so we get a small amount, about 200 milliliters of metabolic water that is produced daily. So fluid output is harder to measure, but if it equals approximately 2,500 milliliters as well, then we are in fluid balance. And so we lose water when we breathe. This is water you cannot actually measure. We lose water when we sweat. We lose water through transpiration. We lose water in defecation and in urination. So the majority of our water is lost via urination. And the amount of water that we lose is going to be dependent on our activity level as well as the environment that we're in. So some of the water that we lose is known as sensible water, while other water is known as insensible. And we can also describe our water loss as obligatory or facultative. So sensible water loss is water loss that we can measure. So this is water loss through things like urination or through defecation. Whereas insensible water loss is water loss through things like breathing or through transpiration. Obligatory water loss is loss of water that we have to lose to get rid of waste products. And then facultative water loss is water loss that is dependent on our hydration level. So it can be more or less. We don't need to lose it. Obligatory is what we have to just to get rid of the waste products. And then fluid imbalances occur when the fluid intake and fluid output are not the same, or the fluid is not sequestered properly, or is not properly balanced throughout our body. So we have the right amount of fluid, but we have more fluid in one region than we're supposed to have. And so we can determine the type of fluid imbalance by two basic questions. So does the fluid imbalance change the osmolarity? And is the fluid imbalance caused by an excess or deficiency of fluid? So we have fluid depletion, volume depletion, and volume excess. These imbalances are associated with constant osmolarity. So there's no change in the solute to water ratio. In a volume depletion, we are losing fluid, but we're losing fluid and ions in equal amounts. So chronic vomiting or diarrhea would cause a volume depletion. A severe hemorrhage would cause volume depletion. Volume excess would be would occur when you're not releasing the fluid properly. So you might take in fluid, but your kidneys aren't releasing anything. So you're keeping the solute and water ratio properly, but you're not getting rid of anything. So that would be a volume excess. And this is often associated with like a kidney problem. Then we have fluid imbalances with changes in osmolarity. So dehydration, if you're sweating a lot, if you are not producing enough antidiuretic hormones, so you are urinating excessively, this would cause you to become dehydrated. So you have a lot of water leaving, but your solutes stay the same. And this is going to produce a hypertonic environment for your cells. And then we have hypotonic hydration, where you have too much water. So if you have ADH hypersecretion, you're not releasing any urine at all. But typically we see hypotonic hydration when we are drinking large amounts of water. So this could be because you maybe were dared to drink a lot of water, or it could be because you're very thirsty. So severe thirst associated with different metabolic problems, and you're drinking straight water with no electrolytes associated. So you've been sweating all day, you're getting rid of water and solute, you're dehydrated, you drink a lot of water, you don't get rid of, or you don't take in any salt or any electrolytes, and that could cause hypotonic hydration. And then fluid sequestration occurs when you have fluid that is not distributed properly. So this is usually associated with severe puffiness around the area that has too much fluid. Excessive fluid means edema, or is known as edema. And so in this case you have severe edema of the right hand due to some allergic reaction. But this could be just as common for someone who is on their feet all day. They could get edema of their feet because they've been working all day long. Or if you don't use your body, if you don't use your legs, then you might have to wear special hose to help reduce the edema in that area. When I say hose, I mean socks, those special tight socks. Okay. So this is just a mechanism, or this is a figure that shows the regulation of water. I'm not going to talk about it right now. I'm actually going to stop this video because it's been 13 minutes. So I will restart in the next video on this slide, okay? So you guys have a great day, and I'll see you in a little bit. Bye.